Good afternoon, everybody. Uneducated Economist here. In this video, we are going to be talking about the future of the housing market. Many people are expecting or anticipating or believe that there is going to be a major housing market correction or crash or just a debacle similar to that of the great financial crisis. And a lot of times when we look at what's taken place within the housing market today, we try to find the similarities of what has happened in the past. And I am going to tell you right now, from what I have experienced from a building supply point of view, we are not in any kind of condition in which that it can be resembling of the past. Now, what I mean by that is there is a huge discrepancy that has taken place right now between the housing market permit issuance, the starts, and the completions. Now, when you look at housing market starts, this is really where the new projects are coming into the future. Like, this isn't new inventory yet. The completion is the new inventory coming onto market. So now if we look at the graphs that I leave down in the description of this video, I'm leaving two different graphs, but then I combined them together into one. The first graph is going to be new privately owned housing units started, and then the other one is newly privately owned housing units completed. And now this is a very interesting chart to look at because something very interesting took place during the COVID pandemic. Now this is the chart, and what I did is I went and highlighted with the yellow is the starts and the green is the completions. So let me show you there closer and you can take a look. Now you can see there's a huge gap that took place between the two. They came together there about a year ago, right? So you can see during the COVID pandemic that the housing markets dropped significantly, but then shot up dramatically, right? That's that yellow line. The gray line is the COVID pandemic, right? This is the shortest, quickest recession in history, you know. Anyway, you can see the starts there had really jumped up and dramatically. So those new starts had a hell of a time getting completed. Like, remember, there was shortages of materials, shortages of labor, shortages of everything had taken place out there, and it was very difficult to try and get those homes completed. But there was a lot of homes started during that time, but not a lot that were being completed. Now, since that time, a very different situation is now taking place. This is a chart over the last year, and you can see by this chart that there is a falling of starts and a rise in completions. Now think about this for just a second. There is a fall in starts and a rising completions. These projects that are being completed, these are left over from the pandemic era when things were backed up. There was a backlog of projects that needed to be done. There was a huge amount of slowdown taking place within the industry because of the shortages that were happening out there. So it took longer for these homes to be completed. Well, now these homes are becoming completed and they are coming onto market, and they're coming on in a very dramatic, significant way comparatively to that of the housing starts. So when you think about it, completions are what has taken place today. Starts is what's going to happen into the future. And when you see the housing market starts dropping, eventually you're going to find the completions peaking out and they will begin to fall as well. They have to fall in line. Like, if you take this chart, I didn't print it out for longer, but if you take the chart back through all the way back to the 60s, you're going to find that it looks very similar to the time prior to COVID, in which that when the starts would rise, shortly after that, the completions would rise. If the starts fell, shortly after that, the completions would fall. And this makes a lot of sense when you think about how the housing market really operates, because the time that you decide that you're going to start a house to the time you actually get it completed can be anywhere from 6 months to a couple of years even to finally get that house to completion. I know people who have been working on projects for better than 2 years now, and there's some houses that I know got started well over 10 years ago that still aren't completed today. So there are times in which that projects get delayed and get delayed significantly, and I believe that was taking place right after the COVID pandemic, in which that a lot of starts had taken place but not a lot of completions were happening. Well, we're finding the evidence of those completions that are now coming onto market, which does not give a whole lot of room for people to want to do new starts. If you have a completed home that doesn't sell, then most likely you're not going to start a new one. And this widening gap that has taken place right now, right, in this between the completions and the starts are falling and the completions are rising. At some point that will flip. That will churn, and the completions will peak out and they will start to diminish and the starts will begin to rise. That moment right there, I think, will be a pivotal moment when it comes to the lumber industry. Now, those of you who have been following me on my channel for any length of time, you have heard me talk a lot about the lumber industry. And now, when following the lumber industry, I found that there is a lot of evidence that takes place within the inventory levels, the mill production, the demand for logs, that preliminary evidence that takes place years before you find it actually occurring within the lumber market industry itself. That ripple effect that takes place can be very obscured with the idea of what's happening at the Federal Reserve, what's happening with the administration and the election changes. All these people want to take this particular information and then apply it to something that has been going on for literally years, if not decades. And so following this information and looking back in time to say, okay, we saw a time during COVID in which that there was a dramatic rise in starts, but not a dramatic rise in completions, which would normally be in correspondence, like they would normally work in conjunction with each other, right? These two would correspond to a rise in starts would eventually rise in completions. This was a very typical market up until COVID, when there was a dramatic rise in starts, but the completions fell dramatically during that time, just simply because there wasn't the availability of labor and material and all the other stuff. We are now seeing the problems that are going to be coming from that as the completions are now moving up, but the starts are falling. We have to consider this going into the future, that this had nothing to do with Trump election. Right? This doesn't have anything to do with the Federal Reserve and the adjustment of interest rates. This has everything to do with the fact that the problems that we were facing within the lumber industry and the housing market were very well evident, and persistent, taking place prior to COVID. Going into 2019, on this channel and in many other channels, people were predicting a recessionary pressure that was coming. I was talking about inventory depletions within the lumber industry that was going to have a catastrophic event happening within the lumber industry. I had no idea that it was going to take lumber up to $1,700 per thousand. I knew it was going to rise, but $1,700 per thousand was very surprising. When people saw that $1,700 per thousand, they knew for sure that that had to do with all the money printing coming from the Federal Reserve. And I said, nah, don't fall for that. You're going to find lumber coming back down to its normal price. Here we are today. And although many people are out there going, dude, you should come to this particular area. It's kicking ass. They're just building all over the place. Yeah, they are. They're completing. The completions are on the rise. I have very little doubt in my mind that there's a lot of projects out there that are getting completed right now, but there's not a lot starting, and this is the future. This is what we have to look at, not what's being completed. I mean, yeah, completed is what we can experience in real time right now. We can look at it and say, yeah, there's a building going together right there, right now. What we can't see a whole lot of is what's coming into the future if the starts are falling. See, this is really where I think a lot of people get misunderstood or get a misunderstanding of what has taken place within the economy when they look at like the evidence that is there right in front of them. They look out their window and they say, yeah, but look what I see right out here. Believe half of what you see and none of what you hear. I've said that so many times on this channel. Now, even this right here is going to be something of an obscured information considering what it is that has taken place within the market itself. I mean, this is talking about new family or new housing starts. Now you have to think about multifamily. You have to think about individual. You have to think about private builds as opposed to, to commercial builds. There's a lot of different sections of the economy to look at, especially when it comes to housing. But this right here is pretty evident to me that we have a dramatic slowdown happening within the new construction market. And if you have a dramatic slowdown happening within the new construction market, then you are going to have a dramatic slowdown in the amount of inventory that's coming into the future. Even though right now you see the completions ramping up and more inventory coming onto the market, and every day people are talking about it and showing the evidence of it, what you have to think about is how much can this continue into the future, right? When does this peak out? When does the new completions, right? I'm going to leave a chart down in the description. You can go check it out yourself. But when does this completion stop rising and start to fall, right? Because the new starts doesn't allow for there to be an ever amount of increasing completions if the new starts are falling, right? See, this is what we have to take into consideration. People look at the Federal Reserve and look at the government and they say, hey, man, these guys need to do something about this. Where the information that they really need to look at is where is it that they can look into the past to say, hey, this is the reason why things are occurring the way they are today. See, it's no surprise to me that we have lumber mills shutting down right now. It's no surprise to me that we have a major depletion of inventory. It's no surprise to me considering what I had said back when lumber was running up to $1,700 per thousand. When lumber goes up to that high, people pull back on their projects. They do not want to start a project when they know it's going to be expensive or difficult to move into the future. But once the project is started, you are forced to go into completion. You have no other choice. Once that project has started, if you do not move forward with it, you are going to go into deterioration, and that is going to cost more money. Replacing boards, paying on interest on loans that, for a project that isn't being completed, time is money. And if that completion is being stalled out because of labor costs, because of shortages, because of all the issues that we were facing back during COVID, then it's no surprise to me that you would have a fall in starts and a rise in completions. And at some point we will see this transition take place where the completions will start to fall and the starts will begin to rise. And at that moment, I think lumber is going to take off. Do we see it yet? No, not yet. Is it coming? I believe so. I think it's only a matter of time before we start seeing that exact issue start to hit the market where the completions are falling. There's less inventory, new inventory coming onto the market, and the people are going to see that there is going to be an advantage for building new projects, and they're going to want to ramp up their new projects only to find that the material available is in depletion. And they're going to find that the lumber prices are going to start moving back up again. I have very little doubt in my mind that this is going to take place. All right, I'm going to leave it at that. God, I can't speak today. The charts are down in the description. Uneducated Economist, you guys let me know.